Welcome to Movie Summary. Here we dive into the world of cinema, breaking down every twist and turn so you can relive your favorite films or discover something new. Today we're exploring The Intouchables, so grab your popcorn and let's jump into the story. Late at night in Paris, Dries is behind the wheel, chauffeuring his employer Philippe through the quiet streets. Traffic is crawling along, so Dries, never one to tolerate boredom, hits the gas, racing past other vehicles and paying no mind to the rules of the road. Naturally, this triggers a pursuit by the police, and Dries wagers €100 that he can shake them off. However, after maneuvering beneath a bridge, he's soon surrounded by patrol cars. Undeterred, he ups the ante to €200, claiming he can talk the officers into giving them a police escort instead of a ticket. He steps out of the car and immediately puts on a performance, feigning outrage and declaring that Philippe, who is wheelchair-bound, requires urgent medical attention. The officers peek inside the trunk and spot the wheelchair, then look in on Philippe, who seems to be convulsing. Another bit of acting. Convinced it's an emergency, the officers drop the speeding charges and agree to escort them to the hospital. In celebration of winning the bet, Dries blasts September by Earth, Wind and Fire. Once they arrive at the hospital, he shares a cigarette with Philippe once the police have driven away, promising to take care of things. In truth, they leave right away, departing before the hospital staff even notices. Their close bond goes back several months. Philippe and his assistant Magali had been conducting interviews to find a new caretaker for him, but the candidates all seemed uninspired and dull. Suddenly, Dries strides in unannounced, pushing ahead of his turn, just to get a signature confirming that he was rejected. He wants the form so he can keep collecting unemployment benefits. His direct, cheeky attitude, coupled with brazen flirting toward Magali, catches Philippe's attention. Rather than simply signing the refusal slip, Philippe tells Dries to come back the following day if he wants his paperwork. Later that day, Dries returns to his own cramped apartment, where he attempts to bathe despite constant interruptions from his younger siblings. Only Mina, his slightly older sister, is able to help keep the others at bay, so Dries can have a little peace. While he's waiting for their mother, Dries notices his brother Adama getting out of a suspicious vehicle. When Adama comes inside, he only says he was at school, grabs his bag, and slips out again, leaving Dries certain that the boy is involved in something shady. That evening, their mother returns home to find Dries there. He presents her with a stolen Fabergé egg and casually claims he's been off on a vacation, but she is furious because he disappeared without contact for 6 months, then reappeared as though her apartment were a hotel. Exhausted by the web of lies and her responsibilities to her other children, she kicks Dries out, telling him not to return. He ends up spending the night outside, sharing smokes and snacks with neighborhood buddies. Come morning, Dries heads back to Philippe's mansion to pick up his paperwork, and the housekeeper, Yvonne, greets him. She ushers him around, explaining the daily routines involved in caring for Philippe, and shows him the bedroom that would be his, complete with a private bathroom. Dries can't resist staring longingly at the bathtub before Yvonne whisks him away to meet Philippe. Philippe hands over the form, but simultaneously offers him a trial job. Dries, intrigued by the room and perhaps drawn by Philippe's intriguing demeanor, accepts the offer. Philippe wagers he won't even last 2 weeks. After settling in, Dries gets a crash course in how to tend to Philippe's needs, stimulating his legs, transferring him into his wheelchair, helping him bathe, and dressing him. It's a bit embarrassing when Dries realizes he's expected to pull on Philippe's high stockings and wipe him when he uses the toilet. Despite his repeated complaints that he'll never do such menial tasks, he ends up doing them anyway, recognizing it's part of his new role. That evening, while Dries snacks on the rooftop, Philippe's teenage daughter Elisa and her boyfriend Bastien barge in, looking for some privacy. Dries orders them to leave, refusing to share his beer and showing them he won't be a pushover. Although the job is challenging, Dries adapts to his daily responsibilities, albeit with a few slip-ups at first. He hands the phone directly to Philippe instead of holding it up to his ear and sometimes forgets the baby monitor in the bathroom. He also learns to handle Philippe's mail. Most letters he opens, but there's a set marked private that he must not read. When he stumbles upon an escort service flyer, Dries starts a separate file for them rather than throwing them out as Philippe instructs. Even as he learns these new duties, Dries finds moments to enjoy himself. He continues flirting with Magali, without success, and sometimes invites escorts to keep him company in his room. One morning, Yvonne bursts in to reprimand him for oversleeping, only to discover some suspicious-looking weaponry in his bag. Though she notices, she keeps quiet for now. Before long, Driss must drive Philippe around town. Insisting that Philippe isn't cargo, Driss refuses to use a typical van with a ramp, opting for a sleek, rarely used sports car instead. Initially, Philippe objects, believing it impractical, but he soon warms to the faster, livelier ride. Yvonne, on the other hand, is far from pleased. When they try to leave the property, they find a neighbor's car blocking the exit. Driss wastes no time in confronting the driver, grabbing him by the collar and threatening him until he moves. Philippe appears both impressed and amused, while Yvonne remains disapproving. Their first stop is a museum where Philippe intends to purchase a new piece of modern art. Driss thinks it's ridiculous to spend money on something that resembles a simple red splotch, but Philippe values abstract art differently. Philippe's relative, however, has concerns. He has uncovered that Driss has been in legal trouble. Despite this, Philippe is unbothered, reasoning that Driss never treats him with pity and is comfortable joking with him as an equal. Back at the mansion, Driss fails once again to win over Magali. He heads to the kitchen for dinner with Yvonne, overhearing Philippe dictate a letter to Magali. Annoyed that it's a private matter, Yvonne shuts off the baby monitor and fills Driss in on the situation. Philippe has an ongoing epistolary relationship with a woman named Eleanor. They've never actually met or exchanged photos. They only correspond by writing letters. Driss also teases Yvonne about the gardener, having caught the lingering looks the two keep exchanging. Later that night, while Driss is trying to sleep, he hears odd noises through the baby monitor. It's Philippe, struggling to breathe. Even though he tries to ignore it, Driss can't help but rush to Philippe's room, calming him down with gentle words and a damp cloth. Once Philippe drifts off, he soon wakes again, complaining that he needs fresh air. Determined not to leave him stranded, Driss bundles him up in warm blankets, gets him in the wheelchair, and takes him out to the riverbank for an impromptu nighttime stroll. Philippe remarks that it's been ages since he's enjoyed Paris by night, and he explains to Driss that medication doesn't always help with his phantom pains. They also chat about Philippe's sex life. Since he's paralyzed, he can't physically satisfy a woman, but he can still feel something when someone rubs his ears, because they remain highly sensitive. Worried his pain might flare up again, Driss shares a joint with Philippe, who's skeptical, but ultimately appreciates the relaxing effect. Their evening ends at a restaurant, where they joke around over a meal. Philippe opens up about his past. He first met his wife during college, and they married soon after. Tragically, she suffered 5 miscarriages and was diagnosed with a terminal illness. They adopted Elisa before Philippe's wife passed. Philippe has always been passionate about extreme sports and the thrill of speed. He took up paragliding because it gave him a rush. Unfortunately, bad weather caused a brutal crash that broke his vertebra. He believes, however, that his real handicap isn't the wheelchair, but rather living without his beloved wife. At some point, Philippe recalls that Driss's 1-month trial has ended. He officially hires Driss, but demands the return of the Fabergé egg, which was a cherished memento from his late wife. She had given him a new one for each year of their relationship. There were exactly 25, marking their life together. The following day, Driss intercepts Mina outside her school. She's upset that he's been ignoring her messages except when he wants a favor, like searching for the stolen Fabergé egg. She also warns him that the police have been calling the apartment. Driss then checks on Adama, who admits he was caught carrying 30 grams of something illegal. He refuses Driss's offer to grab lunch and instead goes off with the same suspicious group as before. Back at Philippe's, Driss notices a letter from Eleanor containing her phone number. Since Philippe won't take the initiative, Driss dials the number himself and hands Philippe the phone, forcing him to actually talk instead of writing. Their conversation is a delight, and soon Philippe can't stop calling her, even just before he and Driss head to watch an opera. Predictably, Driss can't help but poke fun at the performers' outfits and the dramatic show. On another day, Driss encourages Philippe to exchange photos with Eleanor and personally chooses a picture that includes his wheelchair. Meanwhile, Elisa storms into Driss's room, asking for cigarettes and mocking his attempts at painting. Infuriated, he shoos her away, then goes looking for Philippe, who's now telling Yvonne to swap the wheelchair photo for an older picture of himself before his accident. Yvonne sneaks the original shot into the folder Driss has labeled escorts, right as Driss walks in, railing at Philippe about how to better handle Elisa's rebellious attitude, something Yvonne wholeheartedly agrees with. Philippe promises to talk to his daughter, and he's amused to learn that Driss has been painting. Time continues to pass, and their friendship deepens. Driss takes Philippe out to enjoy the snow, jogs with him, and learns more about the sophisticated suits Philippe buys for him. He also listens in via the baby monitor as Philippe doles out some tough love to Elisa. Eventually, Driss completes his first painting and tries to show it to Magali, but his attempt to kiss her earns him a slap. Philippe, on the other hand, is impressed by the artwork and vows to help him sell it. Together, the two continue breaking the mold by buying faster cars, sharing marijuana, and even calling in escorts, enjoying life despite Philippe's limitations. When Philippe's birthday arrives, he's less than thrilled. Each year, he pretends to be surprised by the party his relatives arrange, and the same people show up just to confirm he's still alive. Expecting it to be dull, Philippe joins his guests in listening to live classical music. Meanwhile, Driss finds Elisa in tears in her room. She swallowed some of Yvonne's pills in a misguided attempt at something drastic, but they weren't strong enough to do her harm. She's devastated because Bastien dumped her, calling her a tart. She begs Driss to scare him into apologizing. Driss agrees, but only if she compensates him for the trouble. Meanwhile, Philippe is bragging to a relative about Driss's painting and convinces them to buy it for 11,000 euros. Once Driss returns, he chats with Yvonne, who reveals that Magali is dating someone named Fred, though their relationship is hitting a rocky patch, giving Driss a tiny bit of hope. As the party winds down, Philippe has Driss listen to some of the most significant pieces in classical music, but Driss can't help cracking jokes. Once the musicians finish, Driss plays Boogie Wonderland by Earth, Wind and Fire and starts dancing in the middle of the room. His dance moves are so infectious that the rest of the party joins in, and Philippe looks on, thoroughly entertained. Later, while tucking Philippe in for the night, Driss opens the latest letter from Eleanor, discovering she's finally included a photo of herself, and she's quite attractive. She also suggests they meet next week, when she's in Paris. When that day comes, Yvonne and Driss do their best to dress Philippe up in countless outfits until they find one that suits him perfectly. Since Yvonne is accompanying Philippe on the date, Driss uses his time off to pay Bastien a visit. He intimidates the boy into apologizing to Elisa, ensuring he delivers fresh croissants to her every day, and demands he fix his bad haircut to boot. Afterward, Driss watches his mother from a distance at her workplace, reluctant to approach her directly. Meanwhile, at the restaurant, Philippe grows anxious as he waits with Yvonne, but Eleanor doesn't arrive on time. After an hour passes, Philippe loses hope and phones Driss to come pick him up. He leaves unaware that Eleanor is walking through the entrance at that very moment. That evening, Philippe brings Driss on his private plane, gifting him the money made from the sale of the painting, which thrills Driss beyond words. Upon landing, they head to the countryside the next morning, so Philippe can experience paragliding once more, dragging Driss along for the ride. Though Driss is at first terrified, he soon finds himself screaming in exhilaration, enjoying the rush. Back home, they find Adama waiting for Driss, sporting some nasty bruises on his face. Driss scolds him and demands details, but Adama still won't reveal what kind of trouble he's in. Driss has him wait in his room while he assists Philippe with his bedtime routine. However, Philippe is in no mood to sleep. Instead, he shows Driss a painting and inquires about his family situation. Driss, initially hesitant to talk, finally admits the truth. Adama isn't really his biological brother, and the people Driss calls his parents are actually his aunt and uncle. When he was 8, they took him from Senegal because they couldn't have children of their own. His real name is Bakari Bassari, but because there were already many kids named Bakari, they started calling him Idris, which gradually transformed into Driss. After his uncle died, his aunt unexpectedly had more kids, and Driss slowly felt pushed aside. Philippe echoes Driss's own words about discipline, suggesting Driss needs to be home to help Adama. He decides to let Driss go because he realizes Driss can't devote the rest of his life to caring for an older man. The following morning, Driss prepares to leave. Bastien shows up, sporting a nicer hairdo and holding the daily croissant for Elisa. Magali, meanwhile, comes to bid Driss farewell. He attempts one last flirtation, but she laughs and introduces him to Fred, short for Frederic, revealing that she's in love with another woman. Disappointed yet resigned, Driss says his goodbyes, returning the baby monitor to Yvonne, teasing her about the harmless lie she told him about Magali's love life. In return, she hands him the escort file he had been building, and he realizes that the picture he selected of Philippe is hidden inside. Driss tosses out the file, but keeps the photo as a souvenir. Outside, he sees another car blocking the entrance and instructs its driver to move, stating it's just a matter of principle, even if he no longer works there. Afterward, Driss and Adama pick up their mother at the station, back in their old neighborhood. Philippe, meanwhile, sits through his first dinner with a new caretaker who is strict and unimaginative, a stark contrast to Driss. Philippe leaves mid-meal, clearly unhappy. With Yvonne away on a date with the gardener, no one is there to intervene. As time passes, Driss slips back into his old routines. He hangs out with longtime friends and confronts the men who had been pressuring Adama, telling them to leave his younger brother alone. During an interview for a driver position, a job he lacks formal experience for, Driss successfully impresses the employer by calling himself pragmatic and dropping some unexpectedly detailed art knowledge he picked up from Philippe. This clever move lands him the job. Philippe, on the other hand, is in low spirits. He dislikes all his new caretakers and sinks further into a bad mood. When phantom pain attacks him one evening, he refuses anyone's help. Worried, Yvonne contacts Driss and begs him to come. This leads back to the very scene where the police chase them across Paris, only to end up giving them an escort to the hospital. Afterward, Driss takes Philippe on a drive to the coast, where the view of the ocean soothes Philippe's nerves. A short while later, Driss helps Philippe shave off his scruffy beard and whisks him away to a restaurant. Rather than staying, Driss departs, leaving Philippe to meet someone else for lunch. Wishing him luck, Driss returns the stolen Fabergé egg before saying goodbye. Philippe grows anxious again at the thought of facing this mystery date alone, until he sees it's Eleanor. She beams at him without caring that he's in a wheelchair. As for the real individuals behind the story, the actual Count Felipe Pozzo de Borgo now resides in Morocco. He remarried and has 2 daughters. Meanwhile, Driss's real name is Abdel Yasmin Selou, and he owns his own business, is married, and has 3 children. Their remarkable friendship endures to this day, despite the paths their lives have taken. Thank you for listening to this extended recap. If you enjoyed this full breakdown, be sure to like and subscribe for more cinematic retellings. Stay inspired by the profound wonders and tragedies that shape the greatest stories ever told.